Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Marnier of Spirit. I'm Greg, and I'm your host. It's another Friday night. I had taken a few Fridays off. I was out in Seattle visiting family, and now I'm back, and now we're ready to go ahead and continue on and go right through New Year's and just have a blast. Uh, some of the things that I usually mention, and I know some of you people that have been paying a lot of attention, I'll try to mix it up a little differently tonight so that you're not all bored with the same kind of spiel that I normally do. But, you know, it's important for all of us to understand of where we are in the community, where we are with the whole paranormal uh, family. And a lot of times when I mention things, it's from the heart. And that's the important thing for all of us to do is to go ahead and try to speak that way all the time as far as the paranormal is concerned. Some of the things that I mention again on a weekly basis is I like to mention my authors, the authors that I really like, and the authors that I read when it comes to the paranormal. I've got Ron Yacovetti, I've got Lynn Monet, Dr. Rebecca Foster, Bruce Holliday. Bruce is just amazing, and he's on our Supernatural Links site too. And he does an awesome job with EVPs. And if you haven't seen any of his work, stop by there and check it out because it's really really interesting. I mean, he comes up, he works his spirit guides and his people that watch his rooms. It's all family. It's Lisa, and I can't remember what the gentleman's name is, but anyway, he does an awesome job. And we got Rex Nielsen, and Rex Nielsen is hung up. He had knee surgery. He's another author that's done a tremendous amount of work in the last year and a half, 2 years with his artwork, and he's had some books written or produced on his artwork, and it's great. It's great artwork. So if you get the opportunity, what you know, check him out. Todd Bates. Todd Bates is another author, and then you have Dr. Heatherly Langdon, who is part of Paranormal 101. Great authors, uh, great people. The people that I support as far as charities are concerned are, if I go back and I'll go ahead and I'll mention Tim Miley from Potographs. And it sounds like he may be stepping down, but he always did such great fundraisers for pooches, for dogs or animals in general. And it was called Potographs because he had lost his pup and didn't know what he was going to do, and decided, came up with this little idea. He was going to a Paracon, and he took a picture of himself and his pooch that had passed, and went ahead and made a whole bunch of copies of it and took it to the Paracon, and he sold them, starting off this charity that was called Potographs, and it took off. So in the last couple of years, if you're anywhere in the paranormal, you always had an opportunity to go to one of his events because they were pretty much all around, especially the mid east, the Midwest, going a little east and then going a little north. And he always had a lot of top notch speakers. He had just a great program and did an outstanding job. So my hats off to him. And we had of course, uh, Chris Goskowski and Alex Wilkinson from PKC Paranormal Kicks Cancer, and they're from down in Florida, and they do fundraisers for cancer research. So all the money they make on their fundraisers all goes to cancer research. So that's the other two. And then of course the last one is Howard Petrie's foundation for his daughter, and it's the Jessica Petrie Foundation, and it's a research for expecting mothers and families with pregnant ladies with mental illness. And I had talked to Howard a little bit about this early this last year, and it was like I wanted to add it on because it's like something that we need to help out. So if you cross any of these people, you run into any of these people, and it's at an event or anything, and if they have any way you can go ahead and give them a couple bucks, please do so. It's important for everybody to go ahead and continue on, and that's their way to continue on. And what else do we have? Pretty much that should cover it. I There was some turmoil tonight, and the turmoil happened to be the fact that the speaker that I had for tonight couldn't make it. So what I did is I flip flopped the 2 weeks, and I was expecting to have my guest tonight on, and I was looking forward a lot to next week when he was going to be on, because I've been watching him quite a bit over the years, the last couple of years, and he's always come across with some real great ideas, and he's got a lot of smarts. And then I watched him down in New Orleans, and they were drinking and partying, and I got to see a little more of Mike. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on my guest, and this is Mike Kopf. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Mike. Let me, there you go.
Hello, and thank you for having me on. And yes, you did pronounce it correctly. I'm super impressed.
You know what? What's really amazing is I really enjoyed everything you had to say down in New Orleans. I mean, when you were at the table with Anthony, and you were with we don't have we can mention her name, but I really enjoy her. She's always been a from the first time she came on, and of course we're talking about now I just lost her name.
Ane.
Ane. I don't know how I would blow that one, but Ane is an awesome lady. She enjoys life. She's a great psychic medium. Does is Pulls cards like nobody. I was with her at an event a couple years ago up in Anderson, Minnesota, or it was the Anderson House up in Minnesota, and it was off the Mississippi River. And it was like I spent time with her, and we went ahead and she went around, did a gallery reading, and I was the last one she read. And I almost fell off the chair because she didn't really know me that well at that point. And it was very impressive. So you have your own show. You have a couple shows. Why don't you go ahead and give people an idea of the work that you're doing right now with shows, and what interests you the most about those shows?
Okay. So on Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock Central Time, I do a show called The Energy That Surrounds Us. And that is my primarily paranormal show. And the beauty of it is because I worked really hard with my original co-host Carla Norris to come up with the title for the show that really embodied what we wanted to talk about in the paranormal, because I'm of the belief that the paranormal, by definition, is anything unexplained. So, therefore, I could do a show about UFOs. I could do a show about portals, stargates, equipment, anything that's unexplained, and it falls under the paranormal purview, in my opinion. And so that show enables me to look into a lot of my interests in those categories. And when people bring up cryptids that I'm not familiar with, I look for ghosts, or not ghosts, guests to bring on. And ghosts can come on too. I'm not opposed to that. But I look for guests that, are familiar with that cryptid. And if it interests me, I bring them on and I do shows around that. I tried to do a couple of shows around investigations, like sharing experiences. And I kind of had the feeling like there's a lot of those out there right now. And so it's saturated. And I think people like hearing more from guests. And so I've had guests from Europe on, I've had guests all over the US, not just locals, but I do like to bring on local people as well to bring awareness to people who a lot of paranormal people I think would benefit from knowing. And also, my hope is, for example, I had a couple of investigators from San Antonio, Texas area. And so my hope is if somebody is watching the show that's in the San Antonio area and is like, I really am interested in the paranormal. Now I know who to reach out to. There's these people here. And so that's the big goal, is to help spread awareness. Then on Thursdays, every other Thursday, Kel Ridley from the UK and I host Paranormal Versus. Now, the beauty of this show was we were wanting to see what's the difference of how the paranormal is investigated in Britain, in Ireland, or say, Greece or Europe versus the United States. And one of the questions we like to look at too is Europe has much more history written than the United States. So, how does that impact the paranormal investigations and paranormal activity of the areas? And we had ufologists on, and we like the conspiracy type topics, which, as you mentioned, I have, a third series that I put underneath the energy that surrounds us called Riding Through the Unknown, which is my interest in the disclosure movement and sharing hidden histories and information that most people don't really know about or don't give a lot of thought to. And I've started to realize that some of the topics that I've talked about have a personal connection to me. So it's kind of morphed into everyone is getting the chance to learn about my past along with me. So I don't pre-talk to any of the guests and, script what's coming up. And so when stuff comes up and we start sharing and saying, oh, you have connection to this or that, you're experiencing that the same time I am. And I think that's what some people gravitate towards.
That's a great idea too. if you really stop and think about it. Where you can actually take the whole idea apart, and you could go ahead and say this piece is perfect and this piece is perfect. Where some people would just go ahead and scatter everything across a location and never come up with a specific plan. If you know where I'm going with that, it's when you were talking about cryptids and you were mentioning the fact that you would have an author come on, or you would have an investigator that does nothing but cryptics. And those guys, there's a few of them up here by us too, because we got the Beast of Bray Road, and we got that other one, that big dog or whatever he is,
Dog Man.
Dog Man, and then you have a bunch of them down by you too, in Texas.
The Chupacabra, Dog Man, actually.
Well, he's all over the place.
Yeah. I actually ended up because somebody in the UK said, "You have Dogman near you. How have you not investigated this?" And I said, "I'd never heard of it." And so I went and did a YouTube video where I compiled all my research into the Dogman, listed what sites I used to gather the information. And in the end, I was like, this is the most elusive cryptid I don't think you could ever plan to run across, because I was getting reports of in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, daylight, nighttime, in the dark, cold or hot. I'm like, there is absolutely no way to say, oh, these are the conditions for the Dogman. It was like anything goes.
And that's the same way it is up here. Identical. Year round. Snow, everything. So, I mean, blizzards, they've seen them in blizzards, which is just hard to believe. But when you were talking about your investigations too, did you actually grow up in Texas?
So for the first 6 years of my life, I actually grew up in the north in Illinois.
Yeah.
And so proud to be Yankee born. Although living in Texas now, according to the Constitution of Texas, when you live, I believe it's 14 years consecutively in the state, you become a naturalized Texan. So I put in my time, and I can say I am a Texan now.
Well, that's good. You get to strap on the 6 guns and get the hat, and that's
all
good.
kinds of fun here. The only complaint I have about Texas is we only have really 2 seasons throughout the year. We have the mild summer, the hot summer, the beastly hot summer, and then the mild to cold winter. We don't really get spring or fall here.
I know Anthony Slavos is down there, and he's moving over to San Antonio now, and we're watching him right now because he's been in the forest the last couple of days down there, and it's not in San Antonio. It's over where I don't know where the forest is. Maybe somebody in the chat does. I just pay attention to the investigation and the things that they do down there, because it's quite a bit different than the areas that we cover. They cover a lot of territory in those places. They're him and a couple of them that are the wraith hunters are really great investigators. and they do a really, really great job. And I don't know if you paid any attention. Did you? Oh, okay. Here's the next question. Were you involved in the ghost hunt that was just done?
So the ghost hunt that was done in New Orleans, I unfortunately did not take part in because that was my first speaking engagement, and I didn't want to be tired and then have the network look at me and go, "We took a chance on you being the first showing, and you made us look bad by being tired, all sounded horrible on stage." And so I told Anthony, unfortunately I can't because of speaking, and then find out it ended up being a Q&A session. And I was like, okay, Anthony, next time we're at a Paracon and I'm speaking, you pull me aside and you drag me on that investigation. I'm not doing this anymore.
Right. So how did it go? Did you enjoy yourself when you spoke? Have you spoken before?
So the only time I had spoken was there was a Para Unity conference in Mineral Wells, and I just got up to say, this is my background in the paranormal, and I'll be one of your team, leaders, escorting people around.
Okay.
So Fear Fest was my actual first speaking where I was supposed to have a topic and was going to talk about a topic, which was paranormal investigation to podcasting and interviews, because I always am hearing paranormal investigators and people saying, I don't like doing interviews, I don't like podcasting. And admittedly, I was there in the beginning too. I was anti podcasting, and because I felt like nobody wanted to hear me talk about anything because I'm not known. I didn't feel like I was known enough in the paranormal field. And so my hope was in the talk was to get paranormal investigators to go, look, your show, you're talking with guests, make it a conversation. I have found so many of my guests compliment me and love coming on my show because it's a conversation. It's relaxed. It's not, they don't feel like they're on, the spotlight's on them and they're getting bombarded by questions.
It's it's not the French Revolution, and they're not going to lose their head.
Right. And the same thing with interviews is I you know I like to tell people, I have a theater background, and so I can ad lib and improv like the best of them. But that's not a skill you necessarily need to have an interview, because, like, when you asked me to come on your show, I was like, this will be fun. It'll be a great conversation. Look forward to talking with you. And that's how I approach the interviews. It's a conversation. You're not going to be sitting there bombarding me going, okay, here's question one. Here's question two. We got 20 questions to get through. Make sure your answers are short.
We've seen that. We've both seen that, you know, and that's the thing that I think drives us more our way, is because of what we've seen in the past.
Right.
And it's not. And you know what? To the people that do it, that's fine. That's the way they form their business.
Yeah. I always
You know,
tell people, this is my way. This is how it works for me. It may not be your way.
right.
And I always will laugh with Kel Ridley and her fiance Matt Atkinson, because they have questions that they write up for the guests, and she'll send them over to me, and she's like, okay, there's questions, and I'll read them, and I'm like, okay.
Oh,
And we start with the questions, and then it like turns into conversation, and she always will laugh at me, and she goes, well, I got some of the questions answered, and I was like, yes, but it was still a great show. She goes, oh no, it was a great show, but they just feel comfortable having the questions. And I was asking them why that is to understand, and they said, well, when someone's done talking and you're, thinking what to ask next, there's that momentary pause. And if it's a long pause, that's not good. But if you can think quick on your feet, you don't notice that pause. And so they said, we like to have the questions for when there is that pause starts, we can look at the questions real quick and shoot one off. And I was like, that's actually not a bad idea.
well, the way you really you stop to think about it and you say, you know, what's a better way of really looking at it? And that's just to be true and honest and speak from your heart. And then it all works out.
Right.
You
I,
know,
I agree.
that, some people look for something. I'm not looking for anything. I think you speak for yourself just in your actions and your work.
Right.
That's why we're all here. So when I go ahead and I'm going to take a minute for us just to chill for a second, and what I normally do is I just go down the list and I say hello to everybody that's in the comment section. And it's not going to take too long, I don't think. But it's Danny Botts, Nancy Noonan Kelly, Linda Kruger, Joanne Stewart, Jonathan Keyworth, uh, Paranormal United Network, Parallax. Hello, Nancy. Thank you for
That
your
was me,
support.
actually.
That was you. Okay. Asriana Trudel. You got Barbara Woodbury Spear, Dark Horse Paranormal, and that's about it. So I like to say hello to them. And then I feel it's more like a home.
It is. And I like to acknowledge when people say hello. And um, we always can't, like, when they come in saying hello, if, like, you're asking a question, I'm not going to interrupt you to say hello to someone. So we've started actually on our shows of popping up the hello, and we'll just wave. And we'll be
Okay.
like, we're acknowledging you're there, but we're not in a spot where we can say hello.
I'm never really in. I come across sometimes some people as being in a hurry, but I'm not actually in a hurry. So I don't mind if you see somebody that you know really well, or you've known in the past, you're more than welcome to say hi to them. It's it's not. Is he live also, Greg? What does that mean?
You were talking about Anthony in the
Oh,
forest,
okay. I don't know if he is right now or not. Adriana.
but I will say, though, I am wanting to go to that forest. I'm trying to figure out when A, I have time to go down there, and B, I need to get down there. It's like I want to see what this is like and feel if I can feel it like he was and see what he's seeing and being like, man. And that's the beauty of our field is, just like we were saying, if you have questions or not, each has their own way of doing it, and that's totally perfect. There is no right or wrong. And the same thing comes with investigations. he may be like, there's a portal right in front of you, and I may be like, I don't see or feel anything. And I may see and feel the portal and be like, hey, there's another one over here too. Did you see that one? And that's the beauty of it, is we each all have our own experiences.
Do you have any gifts that you use?
I do actually. So one of my gifts is I used to channel, and so I can feel, like, I call it a spidey sense. And so it's like I'll feel and I'll start to look around because I can feel there's a spirit around. I don't know where they're at, but I can feel them. And so it's like I want to see where it's coming from. So then maybe I can see them, maybe not. And I can hear sometimes what's going on with, I can hear disembodied voices sometimes. Sometimes I won't hear it, but I'll catch it on EVP session. And I had to get a new body cam because one, it broke during an investigation. The location actually fried my body cam.
You got to be kidding.
No, I was talking to police officers about it that are friends of mine that investigate, and they were guests on my show. And I said to him, has your body cam ever recorded 23 seconds and then turned off and turned itself back on and started recording 5 minutes? And they said, absolutely not. They are not designed to shut themselves off and turn back on. And I said, well, that happened to me at this location. Well, after that location was over, I could plug in my body cam. It'll show charging overnight. I'll unplug it, go to turn it on, and it's dead. It would not ever turn back on. And I had an experience too with it where I had a voice over my shoulder say, what are you doing? And my ex-girlfriend is standing next to me, and she goes, did you hear that? I said, yes, I did. And I was so excited because I had the body cam on, and the body cam was creating a low hum that overwrote the EVP.
Wow.
And I was like, I felt so heartbroken. I was like, no, I had a Class A EVP. I knew it. And I was like, man, I had friends trying hard to strip that hum off so they could hear. And they were like, the best we could do is, unless you know it's there, you won't hear it. And I was like, oh, man.
That's really disappointing that it happens. But they do so many different things to us. We had done an investigation, and I had some pictures, and I will send them to you before we get together on your show, because they're of a nurse at Old South Pittsburgh Hospital down in Tennessee. A close personal friend of mine owns Old South, and he owns Old Harriman too. And
I was so upset I couldn't go on that one. I was all set to go to that Para-Unity event at Harriman, and I couldn't get anyone to ride with me, and I just didn't feel comfortable driving from Texas to Tennessee by myself.
That's a long drive.
It is.
No, that's too bad. But I was shooting IR camera the whole time I was there. That was basically what I was doing on the investigation. Plus, I was doing some EVP work. But I wanted to try to capture something. And we ended up going into this furnace room, and we had picked up activity there, and we went back in there after we wanted it to settle down a little bit. And I was sort of fan shooting across like that with this IR camera. And we all knew there was something there, but we just weren't picking it up. You know what I mean? And I came home and I took the camera and I put them all up. When those pictures were taken in that furnace room, it was about halfway through and I had like about 150, 200 pics. When I went through them, I got pretty much to that point where, what was going, I went through the furnace room and there was nothing there. Got all the way to the end, the very end of the pictures. And the picture of the apparition of this nurse was the very last picture. Like somebody had gone in there and taken it from where it would have been in sequence of shots,
Right.
and placed it on the very end. Like maybe I would miss it because they knew I had captured it. And at first I said, you're putting way too much thought into this. But for some of the things that we've all seen happen, there's more to them than meets the eye.
Right. They love messing with equipment.
So I was grateful that I was able to salvage that. And I've had other things that have happened that fit the same T as what we're talking now. With a doll, I had, it was at Poasttown Elementary. And that's another one of my favorite locations as far as places that had children. Because they always come up and they're always around me. And I can always feel them. And it's really cool. And there was one there that happened where I had to put a doll. I went into the doll room and I looked for the prettiest doll I could find. Then I took that doll and I put her on one of those little school chairs. And as it turned out, they actually moved an eddy meter, a rubber eddy, in the rubber case on one of those plastic chairs. They actually moved it 4 inches over a period of, I think it was like 50 minutes. And, it's that kind of stuff that is mind boggling. But you yourself, your basic means of investigating, what you said you used a body cam. Do you still use body cams?
I use it especially when I go to a new location, because the reason I use the body cam is we all know when we're using like cameras and when we turn them off, that's when stuff starts to happen. And so my intention was, by having the body cam, they won't realize, maybe they won't realize it's still running and go to do whatever they're going to do. And the other equipment I use mainly is either a digital recorder or simply my cell phone, and just take photos or record little video bursts on the cell phone. I do carry an IR camera that's got night vision, so especially if it's new location that I haven't been to before, I'll take that, because I like that because I don't have the flashlight light going through all the photos. So when you either get a picture or on a video and you see a bright light, I can tell right away that's not me. So then I go, okay, who was with me? who, what is that, somebody's flashlight, or is that, a paranormal phenomenon? And what I like to do is I will carry with me either a red, a blue, or a green flashlight or purple light. That way, whenever I have that flashlight on and someone takes a photo or a video and they're like, "Oh, hey, there's this purple light comes in," and I'll be like, "Yeah, that's my flashlight. My bad." And, it just makes it easier to identify versus everyone who has a standard white light, and that's what spirit appears as. And so it's like, did I have my flashlight on? Did I not? Is that, and it makes it easier to either say I have potential evidence or debunked, that was my bad.
It's unbelievable what you see on investigations and equipment wise. Uh, I always felt that it was the guy that had the most equipment in their box that was going to end up, and that's where my mentality was back in the day. So
Right.
you'd want to go ahead and get whatever you could to capture something.
I was the same way. I have a full spectrum camera on standby, a GoPro on standby, well, a knockoff version of GoPro that was cheaper. And I have K2 meters, millimeters, and cat balls. I will say though, cat balls is a piece of equipment I'm actually starting to use more at certain places because I've had experience with them that I cannot explain.
Name one.
So one would be I was at a military base that was abandoned and in the PX store, and it was on a bed that was there for the haunted house that happens in October. Well, it's on a puzzle, and I had specifically placed it to where if you wanted that piece to move, you had to move it. There was no accidentally bumping the bed and it would roll to a spot. And it went off to a question. Then, as soon as it stopped, it started up again. And then it stopped, and then it started up again. And stopped, started up again, and stopped, and that was it. And I was like, I had never seen a cat ball go off 4 times in a row. That moment solidified it to me that something just happened.
I didn't mean to ask the question that way, and I apologize because it was like, man alive, I better get this out because I want to go ahead and know about this cat ball stuff. So sometimes I approach a question in the wrong light. Uh,
Oh no, I didn't think you approached it wrong. I
anyway, when we go ahead and we go further than that, you know, uh, we were using I would use an eddy meter quite a bit, eddy plus, and that was my first big piece that I purchased, and that was because of the variety of atmospheric uh, pressure of atmospheric. Now I got a brain fart. When you go ahead and you take all the humidity and the barometric pressure and you take the temperature and all that together, it seems that there's certain people in the paranormal community that think there's certain things that have to be part of when something materializes. And if you watched Anthony last night or the day before, they were using a different piece of equipment that's just sort of experimental right now. And as soon as I saw it, the first thing I thought of was my old Eddie Plus. And vibration was the other one on an Eddie Plus. And that's all together so that then you had all those lights. So that whenever anything went on, if you had vibration like on a table and something was moving like that, that light would go off. Have you ever played with one of those?
I haven't, but I've seen other people do. And so I've watched them, and I look at it and I'm like, okay, I'm not techie. I'm not proficient with equipment like that. And so I'm like, I'll save the money, let them handle that part. I'll stick with what I know equipment wise.
There was you know who Keith Age is?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, he's an investigator from down in Kentucky area. And one of the things about an eddy meter is it gives you temp in the tenths. So, and then if there's a variation between the tenths, like it would go up and then it would come back down, and it would do that a couple times. He had told me, given me an explanation that what that was a spirit that was trying to communicate that couldn't produce enough energy to come across with an EVP, but it was enough energy to change the temperature by a tenth of a degree. And it would continue to go like that. And I found that really, really interesting. So I started paying attention to it on different investigations. And sure enough, things would happen like that. And then we would ask questions later on. And some of the questions pertain directly to that. Like, do you have somebody with you that doesn't have enough energy to go ahead and talk or communicate? And they came across, and it would be a yes. And it would be sort of a validation on that point.
Yeah,
But
I love when that happens, and when it, especially if it's somebody else's equipment validating what you're doing, because there's no way you can say, well, I programmed it to do that, so I manipulated it, made it happen, because it's
okay,
not my equipment. So therefore, I'm not messing somebody else's equipment up.
okay. So here's the scenario. Then we would be in. The scenario was that everything went dead, totally dead. We weren't picking up squat. And then all of a sudden, after it was like a half hour, 40 minutes, I happened to be sitting there, and all of a sudden that light, the temperature light came on, and it started doing that. And that was the only indicator there was going on in the whole entire room. Yeah, EMF mean, K2s, you name it, nothing was working. And it was like, well, boy, they've left. And that's when Keith said, oh no, they haven't left. Just wait a minute. You see what's going on there? That is a spirit, but he doesn't have enough energy right now to communicate with you. And that's where that whole thing started. And it makes you think a little more like what you were saying earlier about how things happen, and it's like you have to have that kind of patience, to wait them out.
Right. And that's one thing I like to make clear when I talk with people about, when they ask, is it really like on TV, the paranormal investigations? And I'm like, no, it really isn't. It's a game of patience. You can be sitting in a room for 45 minutes talking to yourself, And as nutty as that sounds, that's exactly what we do to try and get an EVP. Or we will sit in silence to try and get equipment to go off. And the excitement that you see on the shows when equipment does go off, yes, that is possibly true. That could happen. But these investigations are usually 4 to 6 plus hours. And so TV is like you got 4 or 5 days condensed down to an hour. There's a lot of editing. I used to put on my YouTube channel full investigations, and it was like 2 3 hour videos, and everyone's like not wanting to watch it. And I was like, well, but I don't want to be accused of faking anything, so I left them. They said, no, what you do is you put down on a tile, this is what I caught, and that's why it's cut out. And so I was like, okay. So I started trimming and showing evidence and making shorter videos. But yeah, that was always in the back of my mind, is I did not want to be accused of faking anything. And if I go, and I've gone to locations and had nothing happen. And then, like, one example is I went to Yorktown. Probably it was my third trip there, and I felt like nothing really happened. And I took some photos, some equipment acting weird, but never caught it on film. So I was like, yeah, it was all experience, but no real evidence. So, okay. And then it was like 5 6 months later, one of the people I was on investigation with sent out a message saying, hey, did anyone take photos in this room? And I was like, well, yeah, I probably have photos in there. And she's like, check them. And sure enough, there was something in my photos that I had never seen before. And when I looked at them, I just blanked over. But when she said, really look, it was like, boom. All of a sudden, something was in the pictures. And I'm like, how did I miss this?
So you went all the way up to New York?
Yorktown is a hospital
Pennsylvania.
in Texas. It's
Oh.
Yorktown, Texas.
Okay. Yeah, that caught me for a minute. I thought, boy, oh boy, it sounded like you were up in the East Coast up there.
But I have actually, though, with my parents, not on a paranormal investigation, but I have visited the Yorktown Memorial Battlefield.
As a child?
Actually, as a young adult, I was honestly, I was about to take a cruise with my parents, and we were in the area, and we always arrive a day early, so in case of flight issues or delays, we don't miss our departure. And so they know I like history, and so they were like, we're right by the Yorktown battlefield. Do you want to check it out? And I was like, absolutely. And so I got to do a tour, and I find there, when I was in Yorktown and when I was at the Vicksburg, Mississippi battle site, that I had experiences there to where I called it memory, like past life memory coming in. And I was talking with Dr. Heather from the Warren Society.
Heather Lee Langdon.
Yes, and she said, you actually time traveled because all your senses were firing. Because I said, yeah, I could tell you it was the smell of the air. I could tell you the taste of the air. I could tell you what I seen, I heard. She was like, yeah, therefore you time traveled. And I was like, my mind was blown in that moment going, wait a minute, I did what? How do I do this again?
I'll save something that I have for your show, and it deals with Gettysburg.
That is one place I am really trying to get to.
Oh, I'm not going to mention any of it now, but that was something that turned me probably a good 90 degrees as far as what I was doing, uh, the type of approach that I had for the paranormal, what I was being taught about the paranormal with the equipment and how to do certain operations. And then to be totally blown out of the water by a bunch of people that to me weren't doing it right. And I took exception to it and it changed me. And that's all I'll say, but I'll explain it on your show. And
All
it
right.
and it's you know we all are here. No, none of us are any better than anybody else. I'm not trying to say that I knew something that they didn't. All I'm saying is that we all need to stop and think just like we do in public before we try to communicate with spirit.
Right. And one thing I will say, where I'm like you, I don't view myself as more experienced or less experienced than anyone else. And I had a great teacher, Stephen Woodard, who
Oh,
helped
Woodward.
me. Yep. He helped me with that a lot, overcoming that. And whenever somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I'm a paranormal expert, can I be on your show?" I step back and I'm like, one, how do you call yourself an expert? Because there are no experts in our field. And two, what are you an expert in? And I will sit there and sometimes I'll be like, I'll pass just because I'm like, no, it's like, I'm sorry. The fact you call yourself an expert, I'm tuning out at that point and going, nope, there are no experts. So I'm not sure I want to risk my show's reputation having you on.
Yeah,
And there are other times where I understand when they say an expert in a technique, then I'm like, okay, hold on, let me really think about this and see, okay, let's learn about this technique. So yeah, I'll have them on. Or if it's like a like if someone says, "Oh, I'm an EVP expert," I'm like, "Well, anybody can call themselves an EVP expert. That's not a big draw to me." But if somebody goes, "Oh, I'm an expert in the Estes method," I might give them time on the show because that's an interesting investigation technique, and it'd be interesting to see, how many ways it can be done.
as long as you're bringing that kind of stuff up right now, what's your favorite recorder?
Actually, my ex girlfriend gave me an Olympus digital recorder, little pocket sized, and that's the one I'll carry around and use. And sometimes I'll remember to turn it on, and sometimes I won't, but that's my go to recorder.
It's about that wide.
It's about this long and this wide.
How do you work it?
You just, what I do is I turn it on, hit record, and I just talk, walk around with it in my hand.
Your fingers are bigger than mine. How do you hit those little buttons?
It takes a lot of practice. And a
God,
lot of
my,
times I got to turn the light on
you
to.
know, you're in the middle of a dark field or you're somewhere and you're trying to hit some button, and you got, I was
So,
I was curious because what I was going to say was, I'll bet that you have one of those bigger, like a Tascam or one of those
no.
ones like that.
Actually, how I do it is when I start the investigation, if I'm using that recorder, the second I start, I will hit record and then I never stop it until I'm done for the night. with the investigation. And so, yeah, I end up with large blocks of time, but I'm like, to me, it's so much easier to go through the blocks of time than hearing me fumbling for the button, like you're saying, starting and stopping. And I don't know, I'm of the mindset of if I ask a question, wait the 2 minutes and go to stop it, they may be, finally got the energy up to answer the question. And they're like, well, I stopped it. Oops. And so that's why I leave it run the whole time, is just in case I get an EVP.
Where do you where do you keep it when
In
you're
my
running?
hand, or I'll set it down somewhere nearby me. And I just remember where I set it and grab it when I go to another room.
I have tried to do that numerous times back in the day with this, and I have to say that that kind of method to me always ends up with somebody coming in with the interference noise. There's always something that's going on besides what you would be picking up.
Right.
So, and then I said, well, then I have to keep it on me. So then I thought I'd keep it in my pocket. Well, then you get all that
Yeah, the ruffling of the material.
of the material in that. So that doesn't work either. So
No.
that's why I brought it up, is just curious of what you do to see, if you've got any revelations that are going to go ahead and put me back in the world of the EVP recorder, carrying it around with me and putting it down.
Well, the one thing I do is when I hear somebody, like if I'm holding it and somebody walks up next to me, I'll just call it out and say, so and so walked in the room. And I just mark it right then and there. And so it's like when I go back and listen and I hear them approach, I'm like, at first, you get the excitement of, hey, there's footsteps. Oh, and then it's like you hear your voice saying, so and so entered the room. You're like, oh, all right, let's keep going. And so any noises that come up, I always will say, okay, so and so coughed or so and so did this. But when people are breathing, I don't call that out because, I mean, and when you hear the breath, it's like, I don't know whose breath that is. There's no way to call that out. So it's like, yeah. And the only thing I can do is I will sit there and be like if you hear, it's like, did anybody sigh? Do I remember hearing a sigh? And if I'm like, no. And I'll ask the people that I was with, going, hey, when we're in this room, did you sigh? And they're like, no. I'm like, cool. Then a spirit sighed into the EVP machine. Possibly. I don't claim it, but I say possibly.
You see that?
I do, and she's already messaged me about that, and I am trying to figure out if I can make that work, and with other stuff I got going on, and so we'll
How,
see if I can make it. If I can't, I wish you guys the best. If I can be there, I will let you know.
how many tickets is she making you buy?
One or two.
Victoria is awesome. She
He
works she,
is.
she works with us on Wednesday night now, and she'll be there Wednesday night with us this week. And I would love to have her on every Wednesday night, to tell you the truth, for the show, and she does an awesome job, and she's always been a real pleasure whenever I've had her on.
Yeah.
Now, the last question is one that, why don't you give me two names of people in the paranormal community today that you think are really going to go places in the next couple of years?
Ooh, can I use my own name?
Yes, you can. You can. That's that. Yeah,
Uh,
that are on a roll. And they appear to be going in the right direction. And it doesn't have to be TV. I don't need. I'm
yeah,
just
no.
saying that people that are really taking a certain part of the paranormal and advancing it significantly. How about that?
So one I would say is Southern Fried Spirits Paranormal. That's my ex co-host Carla Norris's group. Um, I investigate with them sometimes, and I technically am a part of the group, but I haven't been able to investigate with them as often. But Carla, Catherine, and Adam, Catherine Gonzalez. Oh shoot, I can't remember the last G. She's got two Gomez, I believe. God, I hope I got her name right. And Adam Ramos are three individuals that, man, when we investigate together, we get so much wild activity, and they go to Jefferson and investigate a hotel there, and they're constantly getting great information and great evidence. So that would be one that I see that team's going far in the paranormal field, like you were saying. And honestly, I would have to say Ane would be the other person I see. And Ane and Shannon Collins, Shannon Michelle Collins, the two of them. So Ane Shin, she does great readings like you were talking about, and she's a really sweet lady and a dear friend of mine. And I met her at Fear Fest, and we ended up forming a friendship and a bond through that entire weekend of supporting each other, helping each other out. And she helped me make my first experience so comforting and so fun. And I was hardly nervous as I thought I would be, but her gift and her readings, I just see more and more people going to her and just excelling from that. And Shannon Michelle Collins is a model and an investigator who's an author. She writes poetry. And I just see her bringing a whole lot more fun and inspiration into the field, and reminding us that, we all have our unique skills and abilities, but we're all in the end, still people. And she was one also at Fear Fest when I met her. We just, like, I would sit at her table and we would just talk about the paranormal and shows. And she was one of the reasons why I was like, when I asked her about coming on a show, and she's like, I don't know. And I said, well, it's conversational. And she's like, oh, well, that may not be so bad. And she ended up coming on the show and having a great time. But it's people like that I feel like they are coming into their own, bringing their own into it. And she's a public speaker. And so I see her going. She was at Salem Fest, I believe is what it was called. And so, yeah, I just see her bringing more awareness to, what's the paranormal field's about, and how each person's, style is their own, and being confident in it.
You think there's a big difference between how things are run across the country from section to section?
I think there is, because I have spoken with some people who are investigators, say on the East Coast, and they're like, oh, we've been doing this for 30, 40 years, and this is how, we do it, and this is this. And it's like, okay, I get it. You're in a place of a lot of battlefields, a lot of history. I get it. And then you come to like Texas, and we're like, yeah, we have a lot of hot spots around here, but we're so big we can't collaborate as much as others do. And we laugh when people are like, well, you live in Dallas. San Antonio is, in your state. Why aren't you, getting together every weekend? And I'm like, that's a 5-hour one-way drive. You don't realize how large our state is. And so, yeah, each region, it's like, and then it's like I talk with people in the Northwest, and it's like, there's not really a lot of paranormal teams, it seems like, up there, but there are a lot of cryptid teams. And so it's like, oh, so I guess you guys are more into that niche. Okay, I get it. That's cool. And so, yeah, and that's what I find is each have kind of clinged to their own claim to fame, and it's kind of interesting to try and break into, like, me as saying a quote Texas boy trying to go to see like Oregon and say, hey, let me come investigate with you, and they're like, you don't investigate like we do. You're not looking into what we look into. Are you sure you want to do this? And it's like, yeah. And there are other people who are like, I have a friend I think she's in Minnesota actually, or Michigan, and she'd run Sirens of the Expanses and Misfits Paranormal Research. And she's like, when are you coming up to investigate? You really need to come up and investigate with us. We want you to come up here and help us investigate. And I'm like, I gotta find time.
You gotta get a muffler and a bunch of big heavy boots and.
But yeah, it's just amazing to me that. And I met Carl L. Johnson and he's like, when are you coming to Rhode Island to investigate? And I'm like, I can only go to so many places and such in the time that I have. And yeah, and so there are places, where people are really inviting, and others where they're like, well, we are set. And I mean, if you were here, maybe, but we can't guarantee we're investigating. Where the people that are like, your friends are like, hey, when you get here, we'll make an investigation. And there's no harm in that. And I don't give ill will to anyone who's like, no, we we're not investigating in that time frame that you're coming up. I'm like, hey, it was worth a shot.
I don't think I missed anybody that was here. I don't remember saying anything about Crystal Hill or End of Days Paranormal.
You did mention End of Days.
I did? Okay. And then
Linda Judge came in.
She just got here then.
Just as we changed over to 10 o'clock.
All right. Oh, that was like 15 minutes ago.
Right.
But it's great having you on. I was very, very interested in some of the ways you handled yourself on investigations. and I'm interested in watching more of your shows because you have a real balance about you on the presentation and how you handle your guests. And it came to me a little late. It was probably about June when I came to that conclusion. And I says, I got to put Mike down. Where am I going to put him down? And and it just was down with everybody else. And before we well, we could talk about it after we close the show, but it's really neat to have you here,
Well, thank you.
and I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope I didn't. I hope I made a little sense.
You
Uh,
made a lot of sense.
I know there's a lot of people that watch both of your shows and my shows, and it's neat to see somewhat of a cross section because I think that's what's necessary to carry the paranormal to the next step.
It is, and I think, like, not trying to, step into what you were discussing before I came on the show, but one of the things I think that's missing really in the paranormal community that I feel like is unfortunate is the word para-unity. And I know a lot of people have said to me that's a bad word, don't use that word, use collaboration or something. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of took it on myself, and Carlo was the same way when we started the show of going, maybe we can take a little bit of that tarnish off of that word para unity and let it shine a little bit. And I'm one of those that I'll say para unity, and a lot of people will say, live it, don't preach it. But I agree with that, but at the same time, I like to point out when I collaborate with people and saying, look at how we're, you know, creating para unity here. We're collaborating. We're getting. There's no drama. There's no anything. We're supporting each other. That's what it's about. And I have come to the conclusion of, you actually got me on a rare appearance of being just me because I have taken the opinion of, I have done over close to 40 interviews now, and I spend a lot of time talking about the shows. And if you really want to get to know the shows, let me bring on the people I work with on the shows, the co host or the host that I have the show with. And so that's what I do now. A lot of times when people will approach me and say, "Hey, we want you on our show to talk about your show," and go, "Can I bring, say, Kel on? Or can I bring Michelle on?" Because they're a part of the show too. And so it's like, if you want the show, let me bring you the show. And so I shared the spotlight. And that was one of the things I think at Fear Fest that impressed Howard and Scotty and Emmy and Shannon and Carl and a lot of the people there was I was supposed to do the Q&A, and with what was going on, we weren't sure we were going to get everyone on. And they approached me and said, "Will you share the spotlight with Shannon?" And I said, "I was just thinking that and putting that thought out into the universe. Let her come on with me." And I was like, I want to share the stage with her. And we had a great Q&A.
That's what it's about. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, but
It really is.
I've decided, I've shined enough let me, share the spotlight with the others around me who may not get to, some of these interviews. And I'm like, you know, let me help introduce, the people on my show to the world. And like Michelle has landed an interview with Andy Decodes, my friend in the UK.
Wow.
I I guest host with him sometimes, and Kel and I are interviewed. We were interviewed by someone, and one of our network heads is wanting to interview me and her, and so he's trying to find time where, because we are respectful of our UK friends, that when we say 9 o'clock our time, we don't realize it's like 3 a.m. their time, and we're going, okay, out of respect of that, we're going to make the show earlier. And I've learned how to pre record shows so that a lot of my UK guests now can air, the episode at their time, but not be up in the wee hours of the morning.
Right, I'm gonna have to start doing that too. That's a good reminder right there. So once again, I want to thank you for being on. It's awesome to have you here. It's a week early, but like you said originally, that was the original spot. So things work out for the good sometimes.
They do, and I had a lot of fun. It was a
Okay,
great episode.
okay. You take it easy, and I want to go ahead and say that you know I'm looking forward to more meetings with you and talks, and that's what it's about. Is like we said, sharing and caring. So if there's nobody else has any questions, we're going to end it. So if you have anything that you want to ask, you've got a couple minutes. It would be nice. But Linda Judd, no, she didn't have, there's no question marks. Okay, everybody, I want to say thank you, first of all, to Mike Kopf. And secondly, to all you people in the audience or all the comment section, it's great having you here. And we're going to go ahead and end this puppy. So you guys all have a good weekend, and we'll see you all later.
Yes,
Take it
thank you
easy.
for having me on.
Thanks, Mike. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
And just hang around, and we'll get this puppy back.